Welcome to the verse-by-verse study of the book of Proverbs. We shall begin chapter 25 today. And yes, Malu's with me today. Verse 1 references two kings. These are more proverbs of Solomon, compiled by the men, meaning the scribes, of Hezekiah, king of Judah. You know, there was about 250-year gap between King Solomon and King Hezekiah, that's mentioned here. Solomon became king around 970 BC after the death of his father David. Recall that he had humbly asked God for wisdom, and God replied, "You have not asked for a long life, but for wisdom and knowledge to govern my people, over whom I have made you king. Therefore, wisdom and knowledge will be given you." So as a result, the kingdom of Israel prospered. This nation became a powerful nation. Unfortunately, after Solomon's death in 922 BC, there was this long list of successor kings that pridefully chose to reject God's wisdom. As a result, this Jewish kingdom fell into decay and division. In fact, the northern kingdom was completely lost to the mighty Assyrians in 7021 BC, and that the remaining weak southern kingdom of Judah was next in line to fall, and that's when Hezekiah became king in 1715 BC. Scripture tells us, unlike most of those kings that preceded him, including his father, he humbled himself with the aid of the prophet Isaiah, and he turned to seek God's guidance. As a result, he also prospered, and the kingdom was safe during his 30-year reign. And as we see here in verse 1, he's also credited with finding the scrolls within the temple and adding these next 5 chapters of precious Proverbs, which begin 25, verse 2. It is the glory of God to conceal a matter. To search out a matter is the glory of kings. Both Solomon and Hezekiah fully understood that God has infinite wisdom. And all we need to do, all a king needs to do, or all we need to do, is to humbly seek him. And he will bless us with that wisdom and guidance. God promised if we seek him, he will be found. He also promises if we seek him, he will prosper us, which is a blessing much more valuable than money. It is a promise of an abundant, fruitful life, full of purpose, peace, and joy. But likewise, God also cautioned us. He said that he is with us as long as we choose to be with him. So one can choose, like Solomon and Hezekiah, to follow him and be prosperous, or we can choose, like most of the other kings did, especially like King Rehoboam, for example, here in this verse, is to not seek him and instead set our hearts on pride and selfishness. And then in the next verse it says, "As the heavens are high and the earth is deep, so the hearts of kings are unsearchable." So we have in the first part of this verse a reminder about God's wisdom and his ways and his thoughts, his power, his love, his knowledge so far exceed our mortal wisdom. In fact, the more we walk with him, the more we come to humbly appreciate just how much we really do not know. And one of the things that we especially do not know, that only God knows, is that God knows the true motivation of someone's heart, including kings. Next, we have remove the dross from the silver, and a silversmith can then produce a vessel. Remove the wicked officials from the king's presence, and his throne will be established through righteousness. So to get to the pure, refined silver, one must first remove the dross, the impurities. Likewise, for one to become a vessel that God can use and prosper, we need to be willing to work at removing our sinful ways, including the removal of those influences and influencers that encourage us in the wrong direction, who often do that for their own selfish gain. Hezekiah knew well from history that most or many of the foolish, prideful, unrighteous kings had been surrounded by manipulating, ungodly advisors. Next, do not exalt yourself, no self-promotion, in the king's presence, and do not claim a place among his great men. It is better for him to say to you, "Come up here," than for him to humiliate you before his nobles. Recall Jesus conveyed the same message, the same wisdom in his parable in Luke 14:10. He told the story of that prideful man that came to the wedding feast and sat in the place of honor, only to be told in front of everyone that he was in the wrong seat. The point is, self-promotion never ends well. The beginning of verse 8 actually starts at the end of verse 7. What you have seen with your eyes, do not bring hastily, the key word is hastily, to court. For what will you do in the end if your neighbor puts you to shame? If you take your neighbor to court, do not betray another's confidence, or the one who hears it may shame you, and the charge against you will stand. The central advice here is one of prudence, to exercise prudence, especially when we're deciding to choose to accuse someone, to make accusations against someone. It should never be done in haste. We should not allow our emotions to influence what we thought we heard or saw. Before we rush to accuse someone of something, we should attempt to confirm the facts, including speaking with the neighbor and listening to their side of the story. We may find that our assumptions are totally wrong. The verse also warns that we should not betray a trust, a confidence, by attempting to justify an accusation by saying something like, "Hey, so-and-so told me this." There's a reason why third-party hearsay evidence is typically not allowed in our courtrooms. It's not admissible because that person was not under oath when they spoke those words, and also they're not there for cross-examination. So the verse warns, if you and I repeat something that someone else told us in confidence without their permission, everyone will know that we are not a person to be trusted. The next 4 verses all begin with the simile "like," and they highlight this value of godly speech. Like apples of gold in settings of silver is a ruling rightly given. Other translations have words spoken in the right circumstances. The author is equating a precious, beautifully crafted piece of jewelry. The same type of value should be placed on the right godly words spoken at the right time in the right way. And another comparison in verse 12. Like an earring of gold or an ornament of fine gold is the rebuke of a wise judge to a listening ear. Here the wisdom says that we should highly value a person that gives us wise, godly advice, even if that advice includes a rebuke. Now a third comparison. Like a snow-cooled drink at harvest time, meaning when it's really hot summer, is a trustworthy messenger to the one who sends him. He refreshes the spirit of his master. The point of the passage is that you and I should appreciate someone like a trusted messenger, which is anyone that we can rely upon to do a good job on our behalf. During this time, there was no internet, telephone, mail system, so much business and social interaction contact was often conducted via a messenger who had the authority to speak and negotiate on your behalf. And to be able to trust in the integrity and the capability of that person brought peace and honor to the person that sent that messenger. In the same way, God is honored when you and I serve him as his faithful messenger. Now, lastly, a comparison of the opposite of trust. Like clouds and wind without rain is the one who boasts of gifts never given. Broken promises are like empty clouds that produce no rain in this arid country. They only bring disappointment. Boastful, broken, empty promises are not of God. Jesus told us plainly that our yes should mean yes, and our no should mean no. Well, we'll finish up chapter 25 next week. Until then, may God bless you and your family with both his grace and his peace. Aloha.